Iceland is the northernmost country in Europe. The people's history and that of the land have intertwined through the centuries. Relations between the land and people have had their ups and downs for more than 1100 years. In the past centuries, soil erosion and desertification in Iceland compared to that experienced by various other nations. On the other hand, the history of soil conservation and cultivation efforts in Iceland could serve as an example of ecosystem restoration anywhere in the world. Iceland was settled in 870. When the settlers arrived in the country, the vegetation had been growing and flourishing from the beginning without grazing, and butter dripped from every blade in this bountiful land. According to research, old place names and written sources, it seems clear that the land's quality was quite good in the first centuries of the settlement, and the area settled reached further inland than would later sustain settlement. According to later research, 60 to 75% of the country is believed to have been covered in vegetation at the beginning of the settlement in the latter part of the 9th century, and birch forest accounted for at least 25% of this. Iceland is believed to have been fully settled in the 10th century, and it can be said that for more than 1100 years that the country has been inhabited, the struggle for survival of the people devastated the vegetation. Settlers exploited the land, immediately began to clear and burn the forest for both livestock and heating, making coal and, to some extent, to gather wood for construction. The composition of Icelandic soils, which is rich in volcanic ash, makes it especially prone to erosion, and this further promoted the enormous soil erosion that has occurred in Iceland. Around the turn of the century, in 1900, the ancient Icelandic forests were only about 1% of the country's surface area. Wind erosion had accelerated after the deforestation of the country. Nevertheless, the greatest erosion has occurred in the volcanic areas of the highlands, although green oases can still be found there. The destruction of vegetation that has occurred in Iceland since the settlement has no parallel in the northern hemisphere. 1907 was a watershed in Iceland's history. The actual battle against blowing sand and soil erosion began. The Icelandic Parliament Alþingi enacted a law on forestry and preventative measures against wind erosion that went into force on the 1st of January 1908. This law laid the cornerstone for organized soil reclamation and forestation efforts in Iceland. Icelandic Sand Reclamation Service, which later became the State Soil Conservation Service, is the oldest land reclamation organization in the world, and has operated continuously to this day. There is a great benefit in reclaimed land. Further land erosion is stopped, useless land becomes valuable again, the country's condition and profile change greatly. Water flow and water quality improve. Shelter builds up and soil becomes more fertile. The condition of soil and vegetation becomes stronger than before, thus being more resistant to natural disturbances like volcanic eruption. People's lives in a hard land become easier. The most urgent environmental project in Iceland in the last 100 years is the battle against the desertification and soil erosion.
The greatest achievement of the work of this organization, the Soil Conservation Service, is undoubtedly the fact that many areas were saved from the demon of sand dunes and the ever-escalating wind erosion. Areas like the lowlands here in the south and in the northeast, they were quite a few villages which were saved or their existence today made possible by the work of the Soil Conservation Service.
It is clear that there would be no settlement or fishing ship operations in Thorlaksöfn today if it had not been for this agency and the Icelandic lime grass. The area of Skeiðin in Árnes district and other rural areas in South Iceland were falling prey to sand. The activities of the State Soil Conservation Service have also made settled areas like the villages of Vík and Kirkjubæjarklaustur a reality. Soil reclamation efforts have completely changed the land's profile and ensure that people continue to live in many rural areas in Iceland. During the first years of the last century, the general public and those who farmed the land had the gravest doubts about finding a remedy for this enormous problem. People made fun of the first attempts to stop the blowing sand. In the last century, there were great disputes with farmers and landowners about soil reclamation areas when land was being fenced and declared protected. In the latter part of the last century, people also argued about the utilization of grazing common lands that were in bad condition. There is now general agreement and great solidarity about soil reclamation efforts, and the biggest task today is to reclaim the lowland where the State Soil Conservation Service is working with more than 600 farmers all over the country to reclaim their lands, along with protection of grazing lands. Farmers contribute work, machinery, knowledge and experience to this far-ranging project and participate in part of the cost. The State Soil Conservation Service in turn supports them with on-site visits and by providing consultation and grass seed as needed and paying part of the fertilizer cost. This cooperation in reclaiming land leads to increased discussion about land utilization and protection of vegetation, which results in increased knowledge and greatly increased interest in the land improvement projects. This collaboration is a symbol of the great solidarity of Icelanders regarding the land reclamation efforts, and the number of those taking an interest in these matters grows steadily. The sincere interest of Mrs. Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, former President of Iceland, regarding all kinds of land improvements, and the great interest in environmental protection of Mr. Ólafur Ragnar Grímsson, President of Iceland, have played a major role in the positive attitudes now prevailing on soil reclamation. The role of volunteers in soil reclamation and forestation associations is of enormous importance, and companies have also contributed to soil reclamation in greater measures. In recent years, land has become extremely valuable, and people have realized that ecosystem restoration and all kinds of land improvements increase the land's value manifold. The public deems it urgent that more should be done in the area of land reclamation, and not at least in the lowlands. Increased knowledge of all kinds of soil reclamation is producing more and better results. Research has greatly increased knowledge, and new methods have been developed to reclaim the land. Equipment and tools are more productive than before, and in recent years the weather gods have blessed soil reclamation teams. For the first time, it is now possible to say that Iceland's vegetation is spreading faster than it is being destroyed. Desertification and soil erosion are still of substantial concern, and we are far from achieving complete victory. At the edge of the highlands and in volcanic mountain areas in South and North Iceland, there is often serious erosion, with corresponding large-scale destruction of vegetation and soil. Ecosystem restoration in these areas is extremely urgent.
I'm very optimistic about the future for the restoration of vegetation in Iceland. The people in Iceland, they have clearly indicated that they want to participate and assist in the restoration work. And the new government has made it clear that they are going to emphasize on land reclamation in the coming years. So I'm very optimistic for the future of soil conservation in Iceland.